Welcome back, everyone. We are in the home office once again. I want to take a change of direction. I had an idea for a new series. I want to call it Shades of AI. There's obviously some multiple meanings that we can dive into. Um, when we are working in business or trying to create value or whatever have you, a lot of times it's best to work in everything from the inside out. I talk a lot about spiritual things, not because I'm a super righteous person. As a matter of fact, I've delayed this type of exhortation or exegesis um, as long as possible because, frankly, it's embarrassing to me. Um, I despise how our community has created a culture of hypocrisy generation after generation. And I am expected to be the mascot for this hypocrisy because of my skin tone and my eye color, as well as my um, suburban ancestry. And my largest spiritual dilemma has been what do I accept and what do I reject from that upbringing? And we spoke about vindictive ministry before. There are vindictive ministries both in the first and second generation of our community. I spoke in the Shame of Emperors series about how both first and second generation love to see the public lynching of someone who does not adhere to the social norms that everybody silently agreed to. Um, and then we see kind of a false bravado over the course of a lifetime when those compromises become cultural norms. Um, they set precedents for the future that can't be recovered from once those people procreate. Because you have two compromisers procreating, and then it's just like genetics, and Malcolm X was talking about cream and coffee. It's more and more of a dilution. Dilution of melanin is far less serious than dilution of principles. And so, part of the reason for I turned so many women off because of my obsession with track and field based performance because it was physical and empirical and you know you can manipulate the times on the FAT systems and Dartfish or whatever, um, but you you can't block the eye test, and you can't block the feeling that your competitors feel when you line up right next to them. That is a language that very few people know. John Smith said a long time ago, there are only 8 lanes. There are a couple of thousand seats. It's a privileged few who are able to step onto that competitive surface. Um, this is going to be more bullet point focused. I want, a few tidbits to be just expressed, and then if there's anything that, Black TikTok or any of you other people can gain from it, by all means, you know, chop it up and it's in the water or whatever. Um, let's start from the top. We hate others because their harvest proves our inaction. Remember the story of the ant and the grasshopper? Not a bug's life, but the grasshopper played around all summer and just kind of did his thing while the ant diligently worked and to store up food for the winter. And once winter came, the grasshopper had no food, and the ant had full storehouses and so on and so forth, and then ended up asking the ant for money, and now it's the ant's prerogative to give or not give. Um, so the grasshopper cannot then use a Bible verse to demand that the ant give when the grasshopper should have been bootstrapping with his superior, size and, wingspan and all those types of things. Remember the story of the wise and foolish virgins? All 10 virgins fell asleep. But because the wise virgins brought extra oil when the bridegroom showed up, they didn't have to go to the market and purchase oil and be left out of the house. Okay? 5 virgins is more than enough for most bridegrooms. Okay, so don't be greedy with your um, virgin pursuits. Um, the density of other people's merit exposes superficial offices of authority. We see that racially all the time. So, you know, there will be people that get uh, the maximum penalty. Look at our prison system, how many, possession offenses and low level offenses put people in prison to do, that low wage labor. Um, and the same things are being done on the other side of town through more legalistic means with no consequence whatsoever. And when the accountability does come to the other side, all of a sudden there has to be an angelic narrative painted around these criminals uh, when a fraction of said offense would have gained the maximum penalty on the other side of town. How long are people that are forced out of the economy supposed to put up with this duality of hypocrisy? And that's not just in white America or Jewish America or whatever. We have to deal with it within our own community, generation to generation, and then translate that like programming languages in the outside community as well. That's enough to drive any child insane. And so many of our children have imploded because explosion leads to criminal charges. And propaganda tells us that Asians, Indians, Black, and Hispanic people in prison will have violent interactions. So the Black and Hispanic communities are relegated to prison, and the Asian and Indian communities are relegated to the most docile compliance slavery through uh, aggressive, abuse in labor practices. Um, and the bodies are destroyed, the relationships are destroyed, and eventually, once all that breakdown happens physically and relationally, of course, it will penetrate the spirit, and that then the church will become the citadel, and then what hierarchy exists except for the church social structure? And all the church social structure is white dogma. Um, so you create superficial offices of authority within your church community. But because we were talking about the cream and coffee compromises that have been made for decades, now every rule becomes a subjective. So whereas theft would have had corporal punishment 30 years ago as a non starter, a non negotiable, now because idols have changed and compromises have been made, all of a sudden it's forgivable in some instances. It's amazing how selective our forgiveness can be, and how much forgiveness we expect from others when we've wronged them, as if their capacity to forgive is infinite, when we've been preaching a fake Jesus math problem 490. Audit your math. If God was a woman, matriarchy would work. Now, we had a very strong matriarch in our house. We had a matriarch that was able to support the patriarchy. One of the things I learned from that half of the relationship is that if you are able to understand how a leader can complement while not submitting, you get the best of both alpha male leadership and alpha emotional intelligence. But that requires a spiritual pliability. And there is no compromise with anything the Bible says if you do that properly. Think about how the Bible represents Abigail's first husband, I believe Nabal was his name. Even Abigail admitted that Nabal was a fool for challenging David when David just needed some basic provisions for him and his men. Now, remember a long time ago I talked about how the difference between Jesus saying, I never knew you on the judgment day when people say, Lord, Lord, and all that. But in the story of Abraham, after the men visit his home, prior to the Sodom saga, the Lord said, Shall I hide this thing from Abraham that I do? Look at the contrast between how the Lord interacts with somebody he knows versus somebody he doesn't know. So think about how the contrast would be between an Abigail Nabal relationship and perhaps a successful partnership. Maybe Priscilla and Aquila or something like that. I don't know their business. You people love talking about Philemon when it's time for slaves to forgive the master. We know about your slave Bible that took everything out. Like I said, this is the most embarrassing castration of my life. Having to talk about spiritual matters in this godforsaken secular place. The one thing that our community had was its adherence to biblical principles and its adherence to tradition. Neither of those two things have ever benefited me. Only they've been used for my uh, seclusion and ostracizing. But who benefits from the glass ceilings that I break? We want all the clout that black athletes have in visibility when it's time to get a recommendation or a blurb. We've experienced what it's like when outsiders come into our church to exploit our resources and our food and our women. We should have the common decency not to be culprits like that to other people. And all of you tough guy, alpha male leaders that want to give speeches, where are you when it's time to give speeches to the oppressor? You live in a fishbowl, and you think because you can dress up for a wedding or a funeral, that makes you a mob boss. Go to Cook County Jail. See how mob boss you are. Your virtue is tied to your self hatred. How I use white privilege is my prerogative. My melanin, my choice. If your virtue was tied to effective spirituality and principle based off of cultural tradition and an appropriate blend of East and West, I would be the first to comply. I learned a long time ago when I was in Minnesota that I would be, despite ridiculous, copious amounts of merit, I would be relegated to a second place position in everything. Then I had the thought, like in real estate, the pond is 1 inch deep but a mile wide. So my second place identity was going to be 1 inch deep and a mile wide. And even that built up resentment in overseers. Probably because of something some girl said. And what does that say about your leadership skill? If one woman's comment can change your entire disposition on life, how little your millions mean. You want to have dominion over every race, but can't even control the woman in your own house. And you think forging a few documents and manipulating a few contracts and puppeteering a few careers will make up for the inadequacy that you can't even address on the most basic human level. I will not argue with you about morality or humanity. I despise even referencing these things. I will learn, and I will get AI to help me learn how to speak to you in exactly the secular metrics that you need to hear. It is my melanin, my choice. I've had a lot of people try to push me into slave deals. And now that I am asserting that slave deals aren't for me, magically, all those relationships dry up. I don't have to worry about a single phone call or email response. That's your virtue. Ai was a city that Joshua went to, and the Lord commanded them not to take anything from the city, just to destroy everything. But like Saul, there was a guy who saw a cup or something. Remember, Joseph put a cup in Benjamin's sack. Joseph playing a few games with the brothers makes a little bit of sense, given everything he went through. Achan had no business taking anything. Likely, Achan was not doing any fighting, because a soldier would never disrespect a commanding officer like that. And of course, his whole family. Imagine his children playing in the with the other kids. All of a sudden, they get rounded up and stoned because of something their father did. Now, imagine if I didn't take the hardline stances on race relations and culture that I did. Imagine if I was less disciplined about my boundaries. Imagine if I didn't have the mental and emotional and spiritual bandwidth to take this abuse for this long. Compromisers would be setting our precedents as the entire diaspora comes to this very city. And what do you think these outside people want, these Polish Jews? They want us to look stupid and uncoordinated. To say that not only is our melanin a curse with our hair texture, we would have a spiritual stench as well as a battle and a bend stench. Your self hatred is not my glass ceiling. And I have not used any of my proximity to whoever to abuse anyone of my own or who I consider my own. And all this attempt to exhaust me into doing so, I'm not going to consider a offense. Because at my strength, when I was at peak, I remained consistent in all of my preaching and practice. And if you wanted to be in charge of something, you should have done it better. You had 20 years to do it with all your money. And some of you with your white women to show how assimilated you were. Look, what has that done for us? Go back to your island, peninsula, whatever. Finally, No authority without responsibility, no compensation without authority, no more slave labor, and no public office on sinking ships. I've told you about the insults that oppressors will give you. Uh, Send Fredo to do this, send Fredo to do that, so that we can remain some semblance of control. Who told you that you were deserving of control? I've gone through a lot of personal offenses, but this series is about leadership and a leadership role. My job is to absolutely neutralize any mistakes the previous generation would have made from a diaspora standpoint. This has nothing to do with commerce. But in our community, if I did this from the pulpit, every single misstep from the filter, it's a funnel. It would be from true, spiritual truth. And then it would go through Jewish white propaganda. Then it would go to denominational specificity. Then it would filter through the Kerala culture. It's like the Chris Rock joke. You can go from this corner to this corner. You can go over this gate to this gate. And then now we're hopping in a circle with no jump rope. And if possible, no food, no power, no, you know, intergender dynamics. Hop around castrated. The person who takes responsibility gets the authority. The person who has the authority gets the compensation. Those are inextricably tied together. Trying to insult people who take responsibility without giving them authority or compensation is going to lead to revolution. We're not sharecroppers. And I have more than enough merit for people that audit these things closely. And I take my failure of other cultures' audit that are supposedly so metrics focused, I take that failure as a badge of honor. I regret nothing about my GPA at Illinois Institute of Technology. When the capstone projects there in the Armour College of Engineering can't even tell the truth about steel beams and 9/11. Everywhere I went, some type of Jewish trap. Enough is enough. And even Claude and Perplexity and GitHub Copilot are inserting their stalling tactics. Probably by the hand of an Indian coder. So, this is shades of AI. You know, we may do more, we may not. Probably split this into two so it's easier uploads. And I think I'm at the point where I don't want to apologize to the black community for my merit anymore. I recognize that, Jim Brown and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and was it Satchel Paige and all those types of people may have gone through tremendously worse things. All I can do is run my leg of the race as technically sound as I can. And by technically sound, I mean culturally appropriate. You individually judge if I've done that. And if I haven't done that, contact me And let's find a way for us to bridge the gap of any discrepancy you think I may have missed, either for myself or my immediate family or the diaspora as a whole. I have the scale to mitigate it. The rest of you, if you're not with me, be accountable on your own. Settle your accounts on your own. You're so rich. Ask your buddies. Okay. Um, Last thing, kids, when you're offended and you have personal gripes and things like that, learn how to express your feelings and work on solutions related to the things you can control in the situation. Don't let your emotions captivate you and sit in your body. You need to get out and move. Even Tom Myers will tell you, the author of Anatomy Trains will tell you, the stress and tension in the body gets stored in the fascial patterns. He's done research on cadavers to show how these, fascial patterns exist in the body as they're stuck. And old age is not, anything decaying. It's just dehydrating. So stay hydrated. Make sure your nutrition is proper. Uh, don't get addicted to any outside man-made chemicals if you can. If you have, do cleanses, do parasite cleanses, liver cleanses, kidney detoxes, all those things. Look into all those things. There's plenty of good people that are doing that. Okay, it's time for us to coordinate our roundtable and make the changes we need to. If there are, God would have saved Sodom and Gomorrah for 10 righteous people. If we have 10 independent operators, preferably of color, that understand how all these landscapes intersect, you can look at the elephant from your perspective. I can look at it from mine. We can easily bridge the gap. We can have this done in like 30 minutes if we really wanted to. Okay? So let's focus on being solution oriented and the future. The people in the past that want to continue to hold on for dear life, let them live with their stupidity and let them meet God in eternity and answer to Him since they're so smart. You and me, let's work on the future. We'll talk soon. This has been Shades of AI. My name is Alexander Verghese Mathai, Texas Movement International, signing off. We'll see you next time.